Welcome back to the show. My guest today is Aaron Collins. Aaron, thanks for coming in today. I appreciate it a lot. Several years ago, I met Aaron in a very unusual way. It has to do with a Wendy's fast food restaurant. I'm not going to get into the details behind that. But we met, and I found out that back then, as a teenager, Aaron is an author. Yep, you heard me right. Aaron writes books. So I thought it'd be really cool to have Aaron in the studio today to kind of get to maybe learn a little bit about him and how he started learning how to write books and where that passion came from. So I'm going to be asking him a number of questions. And I want you to see that even though you might be a young person or an older person or anywhere in between, that you can really do some really extraordinary things if you just learn a couple of tips that I think Aaron can share with you here today. So again, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem. So tell me a little bit about many years ago when that bug of writing a book really started to kick in. The
bug? That was actually, it kind of snuck up on me, to be honest. There was a huge point in my life where I started really getting into, well, my parents have always been kind of into what I would say the cool stuff. They like the shows, the movies, you know, cartoons and stuff. I learned a lot of what I like through my parents. Very good people, but my mom was the cool mom, completely. To the point where one day in high school I was like, I just learned about Magic, the Gathering, and she goes, honey, takes me upstairs, puts this box down of all these cards that blew me away. And on every single little card, there's actually like a bit of lore. And I read these things. I spent all this time, you know, reading these bits of story and started piecing them together. I was like, this is awesome. So I went up to my room and I cut out little pieces of paper, drew little pictures on them, and then put like bits of lore and like ridiculous little small stories. And I realized that I loved it. So eventually, the bug kind of hits you pretty subtly. It sneaks up on you, and you don't really realize that you love it until you find yourselves doing it like all the time. Okay. It's incredible. So it sneaks up on you. I really realized it when I got to high school, and you know, theater became a thing, and I started, you know, being like, oh, I want to act. I want to do all these things. I want to be these different characters, and you know, started loving, you know, the classic, the Romeo and Juliet tales, the classic, you know, Shakespeareans. I had a teacher in high school who got so into Macbeth that she would just stand on her desk and like, yeah, really? From Maeve to Chaps, and it was crazy. And that kind of personality, the people I knew, just kind of subtly infected me with that fascination with like people's stories, people's behaviors, why they are the way they are, and understanding them. And I was like, I can put this into a book. And
so your first idea for the first book came from, I guess, those cards that kind of planted that seed. Is that right? Or?
Yeah, it was. You know, love of high fantasy was a first. Am I talking about Lord of the Rings? Am I allowed to talk about it? Yeah, is that cool? Okay, because I nerd gush about Lord of the Rings. I read it in middle school, hated it. Hated it. Okay. Like, this is the most boring thing in the world. When my mom's like, Harry Potter. And I'm like, oh, awesome. Tried to read, hated reading, despised it. It was terrible. And because I couldn't, you know, I couldn't understand what was so enjoyable about reading a book. I'm like, there's so much, you know, cooler stuff I can do. Went through high school, had a bit of a rough time, and went back to these books, and it became this kind of like safe haven where you can stop, you can breathe, you can, you know, you can be what you want to be, you can meet people who are exciting and interesting, and then you learn these sort of traits you admire in these fictional characters, and then it kind of gives you a self-awareness to realize, you know, oh, I like this hero because, you know, he's this way. I want to meet someone in real life like that. You look for these traits in people: honesty, courage, loyalty. It sounds, you know, like a stage of grandeur, but to be fair, I did end up finding a lot of those people because I realized, hey, I like this in a character. There's got to be somebody out there who expresses, X, Y, Z trait. And now I have a lot of friends, a lot of family who are very X, Y, Z.
So you went from not liking to read books to an author of books.
Yeah,
that's rough. A very interesting cultural shift, or 180, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to the point where I had to go back to some earlier books that became like a wave of popularity and go back and catch up because I didn't like it in the beginning, and then I guess you grow. Well, I used to hate tomatoes. Now I love tomatoes. So I used to hate reading. I love reading. I read all the time. Between writing, you lose the ability to read sometimes because you either do one or the other, obviously. But I used to read I think it was a summer I read 100 books or something like that. It was something crazy.
Wow.
And I ripped through a lot of literature. And I think I even tackled some really crazy history novels at some point where the words were way above what I was able to do. And I was like, why not? Let's give it a shot. It was very intimidating.
So tell me about that first book. What was that first book? How old were you when you wrote the first book? And how that book all evolved?
The first book was about the Wendy's that will not be named, and everybody I met there. It was terrible.
Okay.
It was the first thing that happened with the first book. There was an overwhelming sense of, or rather, there was an overwhelming positivity from people who I thought just would not care. Coworkers who I barely knew, going oh, that's awesome. I'm like, really? So they were like, hey, how about this idea? How about this idea? You ever thought about writing about this? And a lot of their feedback was really genuinely I'm like, no, I never thought of writing about a fast food window. So I did, and it was terrible. It was you look back on your old stuff and you're like, ugh.
Right.
Which, but I appreciate it for what it taught me. I love what it is. I'm glad that I did it. It is not something I'm here, read this, but for me, it's very special, to my heart because it's a lot of stories that I remember fondly for when I was younger. I want to say that 3 or 4 of my writing buddies as of right now who actually they text me or whatever and they're like, I just got back into writing. I just got this huge wave of inspiration from watching so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's awesome. And I really, that first book was able to help me meet all these people who now do the same things I do, who I can now bounce my ideas off of. And I think, honestly, that's probably the most important thing that came from the first book was the social circle it put me in. Because I don't think that if I didn't know other creatives, if I didn't have anybody who at least, like movies or understood characters, I don't know if I would be able to properly create content that I can then forcibly make them read, and then they go, well, this is awesome, but this is boring, and this could be, clarified, or and I take it back and I edit, and it's an awesome process.
And you also wrote a sci-fi book, and so that was not your first book, I guess. That was how many books into your writings was that first sci-fi book, and what was that book called?
Is it bad that I'm losing count?
No, it's not bad.
I think it might have been 4th, maybe.
Bastion was 4th. The book Bastion.
It might have been, yeah. I think it might have been, yeah. Because that was the one I would work on the longest. I'm always working on, my rule is I always have to have 2 or 3 projects going on at one time.
Okay.
Because if something gets stale, I just pop over to another one.
Okay.
And writing is all about about the self-awareness to figure out what works for you and what doesn't. So when,
Explain that a bit more. What works and what doesn't. What do you mean by that?
Well, so there's a really popular statistic out there that I do not know by heart. That's certain percentage, ridiculous percentage of people, read. Like 50% of the population has a book in mind. Like 0.2%, actually does it. Mm-hmm. And I think the real reason behind that, and the real reason that that happens, is because writing is, being an author is equal parts a profession and constantly a hobby. And you can't tip to one side too much, because you lose a certain magic that spectrum, that at that end of the spectrum brings to you. So, like, say if you treat it like a profession, it's very clear when you have a creative who's just doing it because it's a job. It becomes, sometimes it runs the risk of being soulless. It runs the risk of being uninspired or bland. But with a profession, you have that rigid, sense of duty. You have a time schedule you keep yourself on. You get it done because possibly someone's counting on you, or you need to supply a living for yourself. That being said, on the opposite end is a hobby, where when you're on the hobby side of it and you write something, you're like, this is the best thing I have ever done. I am unstoppable, modestly so, and you feel great. You dance around your house. These are not real examples.
I wasn't going to judge.
These are not real examples.
I'm not judging.
Yeah. But you do feel fantastic. That being said, if you're actually too creative and not like enough, businessman, you get lazy with keeping yourself on schedule. You don't have a rigid kind of like a time script to keep yourself to. You're like, oh, I'll write when I feel like I want to write, and that could be 2-3 weeks from now. So it's about balancing like the way that you write with the environment you're in, and figuring out less of what you can do, and this might sound negative, but it's more about what you can't do.
Explain that last part.
So say you have your house, okay? And you have a method of creativity that you admire in somebody else, or that you've seen, you're like, I want to emulate that. Instead of saying, oh, okay, what do I need to be creative? There's a million options. There's an infinite, maybe not infinite. There's a really big amount of options you can do. I can have a waterfall in my bedroom that leads to my basement. That could be inspiring, sure. Right. It's probably more about looking at yourself, because you have to be in that mood to a point to be productive as a creative, I think, for most people. And you start with what you can't do. I can't write when it's raining. I just can't do it. I can't write with all this noise. I can't do it. I can't write without a cup of coffee. Small things that contribute to a greater factor, to a greater environment, that can produce the creative mindset you need to produce something that's wholehearted and worthwhile for you, and fulfilling. That's the big word, is fulfilling. That's why I do what I do, is because when I write something that I know that I think is awesome, I'm like, oh, there's nothing like it. It's fantastic.
So to get into the mindset of writing the books that you do, you create the environment that you want to maximize that, I don't know what the word is, that emotion, that vibe, that environment. Is that fair to say? You get that point of inspiration where you put a metaphorical pen to the paper, and it just comes out like magic. And so for me, if I can talk about me, I write wonderfully on rainy days. Rainy and snowy days. Cloudy days, oh my gosh, that's the most, there's nothing like it. And I don't know why. I have no idea. I don't know if it's like petrichor, if it's like the smell of the rain. I have no idea. But a window open with a cup of coffee, preferably my dog, and cloudy skies, or raining or snowing, and everything's magic. I can write an action scene, I can write lore, I can write a heartfelt scene. But for some people, they hate the rain. Like, it'll completely dampen whatever emotional state they have to be in to get that sort of oomph, I guess, if the term for it. So does it make sense to you with people in a variety of fields that are trying to find that sweet spot in their own goals or their own missions? Maybe you're not an author, or maybe you're not somebody that writes books or articles or whatever, but maybe you want to do something extraordinary, that it's important to create the environment where you thrive in? Does that make sense? Is that true in your mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, the universal fear of a 9-to-5 is, what's usually comforting about that is the stability it offers. You go here, you get a paycheck, you can, you get to keep your house. It's a scary kind of like, it's a fear-based mentality of this stability is what I need to survive. And as an author, there's been plenty of times where I'm like, I need to siphon like some like quarters for Burger King today because you spend your time doing this craft that you hope people will love, but it's not by any means stable unless you're very, very lucky, or something of that respect. That being said, while I don't think it should scare anybody off if it's what you really want to do, I think some people are sometimes miserable if they go through a profession that they endure for a sole reason. But if you go into a 9-to-5 job and you're like, man, every Sunday my friends get together and we all watch really crazy comedies, and that's what you look forward to every week, your job might not be the best thing in the world, but that environment you go home to is nice. It's something to give you something to look forward to. It's a positivity that keeps you inspired and keeps your motors running. Or if you're at work and the job's terrible, but hey, your friends are there and you're productive, but you also have somebody leaving you a cookie on your desk every day when you get back because Janice is waiting or something. It's nice to have that kind of quirky excitement every day. It's about the environment. It's about the kind of atmosphere that you make. It's about or that you're able to find, because sometimes it's not something you can create. Sometimes you have to stumble on it sometimes, which is why sometimes it comes to like a point of luck. I have been in a few jobs where nothing as of yet has brought me the joy that I get from writing, but some jobs I've had to make money, and because that's not a dirty word. It's just you have to have a job,
right.
And because of the people I work with, it was wonderful. Yeah, my current employer is wonderful. She's great to me, and it makes going to work bearable.
You said earlier that you use the example of you get together with some friends that you watch movies or something once a week or whatever. How important is it in your own mind to surround yourself with people that may not do the same thing that you do, i.e., with books, but they feed you in some way, they inspire you in some way, and down the same path of that question is it the role of the individual to recruit those people in your life? Or do people just typically wait around for stuff to happen and people to walk into their lives? How important is it for you to go finding these people?
It depends on a variety of factors. There is a fabled unicorn of a human being out there known as the linchpin.
Yes.
There is a linchpin person. Basically what that is there is somebody who, for some reason, they are enjoyed, loved, to a point where they will attract people who are not even remotely similar, and bring them together. Right. If you find someone like that and you genuinely enjoy being with them, that's awesome. You have hit the gold mine of social activity.
Right.
And assuming all these relationships are healthy, of course, friendship, meeting up with people is also something that cannot be forced. So there's a level of tact with going out and meeting people. And I hold myself up in an apartment for a year and a half, and I had me and my dog, and I'm pretty sure I talked to her more than I talked to anybody else, and it's actually kind of embarrassing.
Right.
But she's a good listener. No, so my dog kept me sane, but I didn't have any social interaction, so I didn't do a lot of great writing, and so I was like, I need to go out and I need to start learning how to step outside the comfort zone and finding some people to hang out with. Mm-hmm. So that being said, it's important to go out there and meet people, but you can't shove your way into a crowd and demand friendship.
No, I'm not saying that. But
of course.
but to purposely put yourself out there in environments to hang around people that are not like you in order for the relationship to be a win-win is fairly important.
You learn things.
Right?
Yeah, you learn things. My characters would be boring if they were all the same.
Yeah, I agree. Same here. I have to have a wide range of friends and people who I can inspire and they can inspire me too.
Oh yeah.
So we're
Absolutely.
quickly getting short on time, but I'd like you to go over, starting with Bastion, real quickly, the 4 books from that forward. a little bit about those books in 6 minutes time to kind of
Sure, I can do
give
that.
the audience a picture of the types of books that you're writing.
Okay, so the first four books are currently in the process of being re-edited and revised because that's awesome. Bastion was the first one. It was like a very high fantasy, swords and shields, magic. It was very fun to write. Basically, ragtag group of people get together who, again, are not alike in any sort of way and just go on adventures. Very stable. I liked it. Scarlet's was that's the biggest one that's being revised at the moment because there's a lot of heartfelt stuff in Scarlet's that I really liked, but that's basically about the people I met at where I worked, and everything they went through, and it was very rawly true to everybody and how, what they went through and things that happened. It was very interesting for people to allow me to see this parts of their lives. Twined and Embers were another kind of like I don't want to say urban fantasy. I actually got my cousin I pulled her in, and I was like, hey, do you want to be on a cover of a modest piece of work? And she's like, no, yes. I was like, yeah, you do. And I was like, so I kind of dragged her to do it, and she was very modest about it. But it was it's a very interesting kind of like it's an empathy-based book. About people. I think it was about creatures who actually literally have to feel empathy to survive. It was pretty fun to write. It was very fun to write. And the newest one that I just put into the final stages of editing that will be done in hopefully a few months is Not a Hero, which is very comic book, superhero based, very flashy. But the general concept of it is what happens when someone you looked at who's a hero to you really isn't, and what happens when someone you look like who was so unabashedly evil actually is a little bit more complex than you think they are. And this has been my favorite one so far, especially with the level of things I've learned. Oh, it's been awesome. That sounds very gushy, I know.
No, not at all. I'm very interested in our audience hearing all this. In 3 minutes time, what advice would you give to people that are maybe sitting on a desire to do something unusual, great, something outside of their box? What kind of encouragement or inspiration could you share with them to encourage them to step out and do what's really way down deep in their soul?
Oh my God, just do it, please. You just don't hurt yourself by, that sounds preachy. If you really want to do something, it's just do it. Even though I'm nervous doing this now, and someone's scared of rejection, or if you're scared of it not working out, or whatever's going on, I'm personally terrified of regretting. That's my big thing. So, the idea of being able to go out there and say, you know what, I did this, and I feel good about taking something that I've deemed is a passion of mine and going out and making it work. It's fun. It's a strange kind of elation that I haven't really experienced anywhere else, where it's a mixture of raw emotion and finding talent and meeting people and creativity. And that's obviously applying to creative things, but if it's if you want to run a business and you get the thrill of crunching numbers to get that perfect margin, or if you want to go out there and you want to sing, it's prepare yourself. Research and prepare yourself for what it means to follow what you want to do, but do it, please. It's a shame for people to think that they can't do this kind of stuff, because I've seen a lot of people who said I can't do it, and they've made amazing things, and I'm like, how can you? I was like, no, you have to do this. It's gonna be heartbreaking if you don't.
So is it fair to say that I think a huge amount of people out there have these hopes and dreams in their hearts, and they die at 85 and 90 years old and haven't even begun to uncover what's possible? Is that fair to say in your own mind?
Yeah. I've known people who have gone sooner that were like, I can't wait till I do this, and things happen, and you can't live in fear of that, because you're going to suffocate yourself with the anxiety of it. Absolutely. But sober reminder, stay realistic, but put one step out, try it, And it's a lot. If you find a couple people to be brave with, that's all the better.
That's important, to surround yourself with a core of people with a network, with a family of some kind.
Oh, I think so.
That can, I think, push you forward through those dips that we all have.
Yeah.
In struggling to recreate ourselves. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's important.
Yeah. That's a good way to say it. Yeah, I like that. That's awesome.
I think
That's
it's
inspiring
true.
to me, actually.
Well, I
like
think
it.
it's true because I mean the folks that I read about that have achieved some really cool stuff in their lives don't do it alone. They've realized that they can't do it alone, and you've surrounded yourself in a variety of ways with people that believe in you, that I would assume prod you sometimes to.
Which is not to assume introverts don't exist. I mean, like that's not the point at all. But
Right.
I mean, you know, it's mostly think about finding what you're comfortable with, what you enjoy, that gives you that margin of this is the state I need to be in, and then going forward from there. Once you're self-aware enough to find out that nice, you know, place where you work, where just your brain clicks and everything falls into place, and find that, learn how to recreate that and harness that and go forward with it, because it's the mindset. Absolutely.
Well said. Aaron, thanks for being on the show, man.
Yeah,
it's been
thank you.
a lot of fun.
That was very nice. I appreciate you having me. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you. Guys, thanks for watching That's Life with John Carver, and we'll be back again real soon, and I appreciate you hanging out with us today. We'll see you soon. Take care.